Hey everybody, it's Tripl-L here to talk about My Hero Academia chapter 319, the chapter that I feel like it's a lot of validation, and also the chapter which features the entire class coming in. Now last week I'm pretty sure I criticized like if the class all the class shows up. I really want to know the logistics, but this chapter I think was actually really solid when it came to justifying what happened. And we'll talk about that as we go through the specific points. But overall, in terms of this implementation, I'm actually pretty happy about it. And from the live stream, I know that people were mentioning that something people were criticizing was whether or not people were actually friends enough with Izuku, which is honestly not something I would have thought to have criticized, and I don't think I'm going to criticize it regardless. And especially this chapter. This chapter is like the author himself seemed like he wants to make sure that everyone understood that these people like Izuku. I think that's the big thing here. It's a very interesting chapter to talk about for some certain points here. In terms of all of the class showing up and grabbing Izuku, I think I might have also mentioned this like really at the beginning as a possibility, but I don't remember. If I find the clip, I'll let you know, but I think it's going to be buried in one of the videos from a while ago. Anyway, everyone, let's just get into it. In terms of general notes, I do have some general notes. The first is talking about general theories that people had. First off, last week apparently there was a a small group of people online that were saying that Bakugo was Toga, which doesn't make sense, and thankfully the author agrees. But there was also something else, and that is the idea that Izuku had lost his place in the class. Now, when this rhetoric had popped up, you guys know, I don't believe it. And this chapter goes to say, like, hey, no, this is not the case. Although the way that it was presented, it seems like this was up. Like we'll get to that point, but it's good to know ultimately that Izuku did not lose his place in the class. This was tied together with the idea that Shinzo was replacing Izuku, which, as we saw in this chapter, just goes to show, no, it's not the case. There's another thing that I also want to cover, and that is specifically the idea that Izuku is a vigilante. Now, as you guys know, I don't buy it. I don't think Izuku's a vigilante. For every chapter before 319, I don't think Izuku's a vigilante. And from my perspective, you don't have a situation where Nezu is saying, we authorize the team up. You don't have that situation, and you don't have a situation where the heroes are all trying to support Izuku. That's not what a vigilante is. Izuku was never a vigilante. And the thing here is, like, it boggles my mind because we are in Hero Academia where heroes are licensed. We even have a series called Vigilantes, and even in that series we start off with a definition of a vigilante, and it's just, this is not what Izuku is in the context of the Hero Academia universe. The reason I bring that up, though, is because in this chapter, I feel like if you're going to say Izuku's a vigilante, 319 is the moment you say it, and it's a very simple thing. It's because Nezu essentially revokes the authorization. Essentially, like, you could still argue he's properly a hero. Like, chances are, like, the author might never refer to Izuku as a vigilante. But with this kind of action, when you're having kids show up to try and take him down, this is more traditional vigilanteism than not. And again, it all, for you guys to know, for me, it all revolves around the definition of vigilante in Hero Academia. When you have Nezu saying authorization, that's it. There is no more questioning of the situation. Everything before this moment, Izuku is on the books, officially authorized to act within the powers of his provisional license. To me, there's just no way to really argue that. Although, again, if you want to say he's a vigilante from 319 onward, I think that's a much more solid argument. But of course, that is my opinion. I think I'm right. I think the context of the manga helps me more. But it really doesn't matter in the long run, because again, I don't think... See, the thing is like, Izuku's status probably isn't going to change anything in the future. I mean, really, what could you get out of a status determiner, right? The best you could get maybe next chapter is like one of the kids criticizing Izuku for being a vigilante or something like that, because he's essentially now not authorized to be teamed up or whatever, if you want to argue it that way, right? It's interesting. We'll have to see, but at the end of the day, this is probably one of the things that's not going to affect Hero Academia in the long run, like this status of Izuku. Now, moving on, let's talk about the significance of this fight in general. What's going to happen next? Well, I'm thinking about it a lot, and It's hard. I think I'll make like a full video where I go through every possibility, but for now I'm just thinking I would like Izuku to go back to UA. You know, I would like him to be happy again. I don't think this is good for Izuku. I think the longer Izuku is doing this, he's going to just spiral more and more. So from that perspective, I would love for this to be sorted. Like, heck, I'd rather Izuku doesn't do any more of this. But, you know, the issue well, Izuku's not agreeing. Izuku doesn't want to go with these kids. So what exactly is going to happen here? Well, this whole fight. It's like the Nagant fight. This fight's gonna hinge on a particular rhetoric, or like the fight between two rhetorics. Is Izuku going to lose because of his exhaustion, or is Izuku going to win because of his analytical ability and his desperation? So it's pretty much exhaustion and teamwork on the other side versus Izuku's exhaustion and analytical ability. Whichever one of those rhetorics prevails is going to be what determines the fight, right? Because, like, on paper, Izuku's tired. There's no real reason to believe that Class 1A is so pathetic that they can't take down Izuku. I mean, they have a few really good tactical assets there. Mineta, for instance. On Izuku's side, though, we don't really know how to quantify how desperate he is. The fact that he's even putting up arms against these people is already indicative of a lot. We don't know if Izuku's going to get desperate here and try and do some pretty questionable things, and we don't know if Izuku's going to be trying to run away. Because right now, Izuku's power set is really built for running away. If Izuku goes into the high skies, that takes out a good chunk of people from going after him unless Ochako was able to support them. It's a really rough time, and then we have to consider other things. Specifically Stain and the second user. The thing is, like, we're seeing this fight here. Might this be the next big fight for Izuku, like the next big power demonstration, right? When you had Muscular, you had Smokescreen being used. When you had Nagant, you had Fa Jin being used. You have the kids here. Is the second user's quirk going to come out? And the second user himself is also a weird factor. The second user, as far as we know, is okay with Izuku having allies. But is he going to draw a line on the kids trying to stop Izuku? Because from his perspective, he doesn't want Izuku to be stuck at UA. Just from what we've seen in the last chapter. Like, what exactly is going to happen here? Is this going to be where the second user comes around to going together with his friends? Or is this where the second user is going to be like, okay, you know what, Izuku? Really? Do what you need to do. Use my quirk if you have to. Get out of there. It's going to be an interesting thing. And then going into Izuku here, Izuku is tired, but there's a fundamental disadvantage between both sides. Izuku probably knows everyone's quirks. There's no way that these people have come up with something new, like in the span of, let's say, 3 weeks. There's a chance that Izuku knows everything they can do right now. And Izuku might know who to pick off first if he wants to make sure he can get away. Alternatively, on the other side, Bakugo only knows of a few of the quirks. He might be able to give everyone a heads up, but the second and third user's quirks are the problem, and the third user's quirk can replicate 100% right now. You know, something also worth pointing out is that we haven't seen any teachers. I think it's pretty insane to not have any teachers here with the kids. Like, especially if Nezu is feeling willing enough to send out the order to say, hey, go get him back. I am concerned that he thought it was okay to not send any of the pro heroes with them, because that would make it a little bit more interesting. That might be probably the most questionable thing here. Like, if you want to get Izuku back, you send Aizawa. Even if Aizawa is currently recovering, this is an emergency situation. You send in Aizawa, because that gives the kids a ridiculous advantage other than trying to handle Berserker Izuku, which, concerning. So, right now, I'm kind of leaning on the side that Izuku gets away somehow. But I'd be very happy if he doesn't. It's just like, there's a few plot elements that are kind of weird, and I haven't really been able to think about them fully in terms of like what exactly they're leading to. So my opinion is still very open to being changed. But I think either way that we go here, it'll be fine. This might be the fight that shows off the second user's quirk, and then there's Stain's involvement here. I think Stain still is going to be something. Like, if you want to know something radical, like, I think the possibility that Stain comes in and helps Izuku, like, that's not 0%. I think that's a sizable percentage. We'll have to see. Anyway, with that out of the way, let's get into the page-by-page walkthrough proper. Here we go. We go into page 1, and this just shows the conclusion that the kids have come up with after getting that letter. We see pieces of letter here from Bakugo. I looked at the letter, and there's a small difference. It's specifically on this piece right here. Oh god, I have to come in to see it. Yeah, that piece of paper has hope and smile. I looked at Uraraka's letter, and she doesn't have the hope and smile thing. So it seems like Bakugo might have had a different version, or I don't know. Like the other two pieces are consistent with what everyone else got, but it's that hope and smile. It's not in Ochako's. So it's interesting how generic that letter was in general. Anyway, other than that, that first page isn't all that valuable. We then go into page 3, and this is just a setting page. It just sets up things. It's good to see that all the kids are together. I guess if there's something for you to take away from this, it's who's sitting next to who, I guess, if you really want to dig into that. Page 4, though, is the really important justification page. On this page, we have the 3 relevant people saying that their mentors are not picking up the phone, which I thought was really good, and I really liked Bakugo calling him Denim Head. Then we have Jiro's information and Ojiro's information. So Jiro tells us All Might is still MIA, so that's good. And then Ojiro comes in with the really critical lines, specifically saying that they are still first years, so technicality first years. People pointed out, like, with Shindo went up a year. Honestly, I think this is really inconsistent. Like, if you're gonna upgrade Shindo, you can upgrade the kids at UA. Like, this just makes everything weird, and it causes the kids to have to refer to themselves as Class A, which is a really generic term in general. So, it's not something that I don't fully get behind it. I think that's inconsistent. That is legitimately something I think you can criticize the author about. I think what might be happening here is that maybe from an editorial perspective, you don't want to change the identity or the name of the identity of what these kids were. Maybe, but like, yeah, I don't know. Like, there's nothing wrong with just saying they're second years. It's odder that UA is being so different about this when you have like Shindo's situation and his upgrade. So, inconsistency at best. Regardless, it's Class A, so we'll just refer to them as Class A for now. Anyway, Ojiro then goes out, and this is an important justification here, to tell us that they have been cooped up in the dorms and helping out with local security. So that's important because, one, it tells us why they haven't heard of the local legend that is Izuku right now. Like, if they're not out on the streets, they're not hearing about this guy in the weird beat-up outfit coming in to help them. And two, it justifies why Nezu is able to just say, oh yeah, 20 kids, a few of who are incredible battle potentials. Yeah, you can just go out on the streets. So interesting. Also interesting that other schools are sending out their kids to help the refugee effort. Well, you know, like asterisks, because we don't know what exactly local security means in this context. But it's interesting how differently UA treats their first years. I guess that actually no. There's no real way to justify this. They have provisional licenses. Yeah. What matters here is that these lines are the justification for why things are going out the way they did. Not gonna lie, if that line doesn't come out there, I would have criticized all the kids being able to go after Izuku right now. But when they're just a stationary force, that's totally fine. So good on the author for putting that in there, because that does show he's aware of the weirdness that would have happened otherwise. After that, Ojiro says it's tough to find out about what's going on in there, and that's just, out there, and that's just to justify why they're so blind in general on the situation with Izuku. So, okay, page 5 is Bakugo's rationalization and the thing about who snuck in. And then we have Bakugo talking about the worst case scenario, which I thought was really neat. So first, with the rationalization, I'm only going to attack the specificity of the line, but given that this was also in like the fan translation, it's probably the correct thing in Japanese as well. But Bakugo says it had to be All Might that slipped the letters under their doors in the dead of night. No, it doesn't have to just be All Might. There's a lot of ways this could have gone down. Like, get creative. You guys, fans of series, are always the most creative people. Is there conceivably other ways of getting letters into UA? Yes, of course. UA is crawling in robots. Is there anything stopping from All Might giving the letter to, say, someone like President Mike, and having President Mike give those to Nezu, and then have Nezu have the robots deliver them? Is there anything stopping that? No, there isn't. Is there anything stopping All Might just taking the letters to Nezu in general, and having him just distribute it himself? No, there's nothing really stopping that. Like, Nezu's been in on it from the very beginning, given that he was authorizing this team up. So what's occurring here is actually, this is an example of a good bad rationalization. The reason it's bad is because the language here specifically, it had to be All Might. That's not entirely true in the grand scheme of things. But it's a good bad rationalization because it speeds the story along and it gets close enough. Like, it gets close enough that they can have the answer. Ultimately, it doesn't really matter whether or not it's All Might that snuck in the letters. What matters is that Bakugo still reaches an answer that All Might's involved with Izuku in this particular situation. Now, if you had him going through the entire process of all the variables in this, that would have slowed down the manga. So this is actually a really good way of using a bad thought process, but just one that pretty much speeds up the story. Again, though, this is one of those areas where you could play around with it. Like, if Hero Academia was a slightly more thoughtful series, if it actually cared more about mind games, you could have a situation here where this would have turned into unreliable narrator, and then it could have turned into something like, oh no, it actually wasn't All Might. Like, those kind of situations where you're having someone give you a theory and then you're proving the theory wrong, that really only happens in mystery series, because what this statement does is that it gives readers a false perception, as you know, like unreliable narrator does. False perception, and in that false perception, you have the opportunity to create a surprise. When it comes to Bakugo, Bakugo does make a few other sweeping generalizations that, while he doesn't fully understand everything about All Might in particular, but he understands enough to be able to make his conclusions. And that's something that's actually really worth pointing out, is that Bakugo, even though he has like 80% of the information, is still able to go in there and make some really good conclusions. In terms of what Bakugo doesn't know, Bakugo can probably not quantify the effect that Night Eye's death has on All Might. So that's a little bit of a variable that might throw off Bakugo's projections in any other series. But because we're kind of just going into this fight here, Bakugo in this case is right enough. Anyway, what I really want to say about this is just, it's interesting to see how the author has Bakugo coming up with incomplete conclusions, but still being complete enough that he's getting correct. And then the other thing is that this is the kind of technique that would throw readers off in a more mystery-focused series. If, you know, to Hero Academia's credit, these kind of lines are the kind of lines that we should be looking at when we're talking about traitor theory, because traitor is probably, there's some things that people have said that are there to probably throw us off. That kind of scrutiny should be applied more to the traitor angle of Hero Academia. Anyway, going into that bottom third of the page, where you have Bakugo talking about how much he knows Izuku and All Might, I think him setting it up with like, this is the worst scenario I can think of, that is so cool. Honestly, Bakugo came in here so strong. Even with incomplete information, he's getting the answers, and it's just more of Bakugo supremacy. Like, Bakugo's always been a competent person, and now we're seeing full-on rationalization Bakugo, which is really amazing. Now, there is this thing here where you see that his hands are scuffed up, and some people want to think that that might be Bakugo using explosion just to vent his frustrations and whatnot. Now, the only problem with that is, look at Bakugo's face here, and then look at Shoto's face. Bakugo and Shoto are both still pretty banged up, such that those explosion marks, that might just be leftovers from the fight, given that they have so much scarring. That's why I would be very careful with saying that he was using explosion to vent. You know, just a small thing. We then go into page 6, which I think is Ochako's most significant contribution, especially when you look at the rest of the chapter. It was really odd. So just keep it in mind, like with this context and Ochako saying let's force the issue, what they're pretty much doing, like it's clear what happened. Ochako decided to force the issue by having Nezu call in Endeavor using their ties as principal and alumni, right? It makes sense. And then when on page 7 you see it, page 7 starts with Endeavor calling it out that this was a trap, right? So, good stuff. It's unfortunate that this was Ochako's biggest contribution in the chapter, but the important thing here is that she's contributing. Now, of course, because Ochako is the slowest one in the bunch here, who helps the heroes when they're suffering? Friends and family. That's still the answer that we're seeing here. When you have everyone showing up to go deal with Izuku, the answer is friends and family. And now we will now see, I hope Ochako goes into the next stage of this question. Who helps the hero when he's suffering and doesn't want help? I hope Ochako realizes that's the next stage. Because if we're going to be doing this with her, if we're going to be slowing down this process, then yes, I would very much like to see her deal with the reality of having someone who doesn't think that they have a problem. God, Ochako's about to go through the first step of getting someone to admit to going to rehab. Alright, page 8. This page shows off Nezu being adaptable, and it shows off Shoto attacking Endeavor, rightfully so. Good on Shoto for calling out his dad here. Yeah, I agree with him. But with Nezu, I think this is really important. Specifically that he says, I'm always open to change my opinion based on the facts. Yeah, that's a reasonable person right there. And this is important because it again shows how much authority Nezu had in this particular situation. He signed off on the whole thing with Izuku, and now he's thinking like, okay, yeah, if this actually is a pretty toxic relationship for Izuku and All Might, yeah, well, I think we should get him back. And he probably got updated with the situation from Endeavor. He probably knows like how badly this has been going on the hero side here. Page 9 is Bakugo flat out talking about All Might and Izuku and why they're the worst pair, and that was just again so good to see this situation here. I like Bakugo saying that Izuku's screwed up in the head. He's pretty much saying like Izuku is too sacrificial. Never takes himself into account. Yep, we already know that. Bakugo's already told us this from the moment that he yelled at Izuku and got gutted or got speared in the gut by All For One. Now, there's a critical line here where he says, Izuku's the kind of person that just says, I'm fine. This is actually a really funny line for later. I think the thing that impressed me the most with Bakugo is how much he talked about All Might, because we don't really get to talk about All Might's negative aspects that often. So I like that he pointed out that All Might being a symbol of peace, he's not going to be... All Might having the same mentality as Izuku isn't the best one to stop Izuku. After that, we have page 10. Endeavor is thinking about stuff, and Bakugo just saying that Izuku and All Might are ultimately a toxic relationship of enablers. And then we have the speed thing. So, seems like Midoriya finally called himself off from All Might too. If only we could have the same speed to be by his side. Okay, so, just want to make this clear. You understand the sentimentality that's being said here when he says the same speed to stay up with him. But let's remember, this started as a plan where these people were going to be in Izuku's wake specifically to clean up anything that happened. And let's remember that they are behind Izuku so that they don't scare away anyone that's attacking Izuku, so that they have the best shot to catch someone. These guys, if they want to, they can 100% be right next to Izuku at all times. It's not like the kids. The kids are weaker than them. The kids, and you know, I'm saying this because the kids might end up following Izuku if something weird happens, but they could follow Izuku if they really wanted to. Let's not forget how we got into this situation. They got into this situation because they thought this was the best thing to do. They thought this was the best way to get All For One out in the open. Alright, this is not an issue of speed. This is just the author coming up with a way of saying like, oh my god, yeah, you know, like, we just can't keep up with him. We can't keep up with the kid that goes into the woods to sneak a small snack. No, this is pretty much these guys staring at their navels, just being like, yeah, you know, we're just too caught up, man. We have to be in this warehouse, you know, we have to go take our meetings, and in an apocalypse, I know, the meetings are still going. Yeah, no, this is just them coming up with a way of trying to justify why it has to be the kids coming out there, man. Like, it's honestly really ridiculous. Honestly, it's really ridiculous. Hawks is one of the fastest guys alive, and you're saying he doesn't have the same speed to be by his side. Bro, Izuku's speed led him into a situation where Bakugo was able to catch up with him and help take down a villain. Come, there's no speed here. Okay, I don't know how much more I could beat that into the ground. But like, this line, this is just there. It's just a really weird sentimental way of saying like, yeah, we aren't going to be able to help Izuku. I know, insane. Now mind you, if they were saying like, oh yeah, we're busy dealing with every other part of Japan, that's different, because that's showing that they're being responsible. But they're talking in a warehouse. Now, here's the funny thing. It's because, like, Hero Academia... Like, I've realized it now, especially with looking at the recent Hero Academia episode. Hero Academia likes alternating the focus between the kids and the heroes. And it's interesting how they do this, because I was looking at that recent episode, and they were talking about how the kids were going to be the insurance policy in case the pro heroes failed. And it's just so funny that in a situation where the kids are insurance policy, you go into the failure route, and it's primarily the pro heroes plus Izuku doing stuff, right? This is a thing with Hero Academia. Like, when the kids are going to be important, the pro kid rhetoric is going to go up, and the ability of the pro heroes is going to shoot down in order to justify the kids going up. But then once that whole situation is over and it goes back to the adults are going to be right back up there in prominence, and it's going to be like, really? Well, like, what's going on here? It's just shifting rhetorics to suit whoever is in the focus. If it's kids focused, adults are going to be stupid. If it's adult focused, the kids are pretty much going to be locked in one place without being able to go anywhere, even though other schools are going other places. It's pretty unfortunate how they're actually no, that is a pretty big thing here. The kids are pretty much kept in one place static until it's their turn to do something. Yeah, I don't think I respect this. Now I'm thinking about it, I don't think I respect. Yeah, no, this is pretty lame. This is pretty lame. I think I will criticize that. This is pretty lame. Anyway, we go into page 11, the shot of people grabbing the phone. So the way I interpreted this is that he took that phone out and those kids jumped for it. Like, quite a few people chased for that phone. Because there's so many of them going for it, they tossed it out of his hand, which I think is pretty rude. But like, the point of the scene is revealed in the people who are on the page, right? Hagakure, Koda, Sero. Of these four people, only Mineta actually has a thing with Izuku, because Mineta talks to Izuku a bit. I think if you were to look at this too, like, Hagakure and Koda being the ones to run in there are the most important things, because these are pretty much the people that don't really talk to Izuku. The reason that the author had to do this, and the reason he had to show desperation, and he had to show, like, Koda saying, like, oh yeah, even though we've only spent a year together, and mind you, they live in the same house at this point. The reason he had to say that was to show that even among the no-names of the class, there is friendship between them. Now, me personally, I believe it. I think that I believe it. Like, you guys lived in the same house. You've been through, like, stress together. I believe that you guys would be friends. So it's not really a big deal, but the author went with these characters specifically to make it clear in your head that they are friends with Izuku. You don't have Koda, the guy who's the quietest person in the world, talking, unless you want to make a point about how much this guy cares about Izuku. Now, that said, I think that's good, because when you have a situation where people are questioning the friendship between these people, you need to actually be able to justify that everyone, even the most irrelevant person, is on Izuku's side on this one. Or, you know, like, they care about Izuku. Page 12 is Shoto being shocked. And yes, I too think it's ridiculous that Izuku thought that people would be satisfied with those letters. That's kind of like telling them, like, a big piece of news and then just kind of ghosting, right? Actually, yeah, that's exactly what he did. Anyway, the idea that Izuku didn't think more about that, I think that's pretty on point for tunnel vision Izuku. We then have Ida saying that he's willing to follow Izuku and work alongside him, which I think is really good. This is the strangest thing here. Ida, that line sets up an alternative to what Nezu set up. Because Nezu is saying, do what you must to bring them back to us. So this is the interesting thing. Had Nezu not made that other line, I think we could have seen these kids teaming up with Izuku and moving as a unit of 20 people, which I think that would have been amazing. But Nezu is the one calling them back here. But now if things fail too much, because Ida set this up here, working alongside him, you know, if we go into a compromise, I could see a compromise occurring with the kids just following Izuku around. I don't think that, and yo, if we actually get into a situation where kids are following Izuku around, I really want to know how Hawks is going to justify how he's not at Izuku's speed. But if we end up with the compromise, because what matters here is that Ida seems to be open to this. If we end up with a compromise, we'll end up in a situation where even second user will most likely be happy because they'll be on the move, and also Izuku would have his allies. For second user, who probably had a platoon himself when he was going up against All For One, I'm pretty sure he'd be dancing in his grave. So ultimately, this is just a really worthwhile line. Now, here, Ida brings up the thing about the thorny path. And the reason I want to talk about this is because All For One mentioned the thorny path that Izuku was on. And I'm thinking, like, if Izuku's friends are there, Izuku likely won't have his soul grinded away. I just really hope, like, if Izuku gets away from this, I really hope we don't go through a sequence where All For One is like, even when your friends showed up, you still ignored them, and now you're in my clutches, right? I really hope we avoid that kind of situation. It's just because I don't want All For One to gloat. Like, God, he's the worst gloater in the world. Page 13 is Nezu talking about endeavors maturing, which is interesting. It just kind of reminds you educator and student kind of role. Then you have him saying that he authorized the team up, which again adds so much legitimacy to the Izuku situation. In my opinion, when you have him saying that as the principal of UA, likely with his own little hero license, I see that as he gave Izuku permission to act in the capacity of the powers afforded to him by the provisional license. If you want to go down the most specific route to justify this. Now beyond that, we had Nezu saying that Izuku could come back whenever. I personally did not think that was a shock, but then the other kids thought that was a shock. So, you know, when you have that kind of thing, it seems like that's something that the author says it out loud just to make sure everyone's on the same page, that Izuku's not really expelled or anything like that. I don't need it, but I know with the way that manga readers are, some of them might need that kind of thing. This is, you guys know too, like you guys know how people get about stuff unless it's explicitly stated. It's like the vocal minority is like that. Page 14 is perhaps the most concerning page because Nezu invokes the UA barrier. The barrier being brought up means it's guaranteed it's going to be tested, and if it's guaranteed to be tested, that tells me that attack on UA is coming. People are also wondering, wait, how are they going to stop Shigaraki? Shigaraki can disintegrate everything. Well, that's where I said like Nezu's probably not an idiot. Like they know what Shigaraki can do, like since like that first arc, the simulation joint, you know, the one with the villain's first attack. They know that Shigaraki can do that. If Nezu's smart, he should have figured out that Shigaraki's probably the one that brought down the wall way back when the press got into the school. And even now, thanks to all the people who were on the ground, they know that Shigaraki's decay propagates. So if Nezu is saying that it will prove its worth, it has to be a barrier worth standing against Shigaraki. So at this point, I think if you were to believe the UA barrier is actually a force field, like actually an energetic force field, I don't think that would be a bad thought. I think you could say it's probably a barrier, and you'd probably be right later on. If it's not a force field, then it'll be funny if it's just like a whole lot of guns. Like, I would love to see a bunch of guns just come out of UA, and they're being used on the villains. That would be hilarious in its own little way. But yeah, attack on UA is happening. That barrier is going to be tested. It's happening. There's no way we get out of Hero Academia without that barrier proving its worth. Of course, the fact that attack on UA would happen also makes you wonder, like, how do we end up in that situation? Well, we might end up in attack on UA after, like, All Might dies or something like that. Like, Izuku goes back to UA to recover or something stupid like that. Anyway, speaking of All Might, Nezu probably brought up All Might because he's saying that school has housed One For All holders before, and All For One didn't attack UA then. Mind you, that was before Shigaraki, but that is a reassuring thought. Like, All For One hasn't attacked UA before. He just kind of harvests from there. Next critical panel is next critical line is bring them back to us. So not just Izuku, but All Might as well. And this is a pretty critical order, all things considered. Page 15 shows all the kids arriving. My question is, though, if they had a GPS tracker, I feel it's one that's so accurate that the top three could follow Izuku around. Like, why were they separated? Like, if there's a GPS tracker, all those kids should have been relatively close by. Well, mind you, no, they are 100% were close by because they show up here within moments. So actually, likely, Bakugo maybe went ahead of them slightly, and then everyone shows up right behind him. But given that there's a GPS tracker involved, I don't see the purpose of that line in the grand scheme of things, just because the GPS is there. But honestly, it doesn't really matter. It's just another little thing that kind of helps move along. We can tell that things happen quickly here, because not much has changed. The people are still surrounding Izuku. Yeah, like not that much time passed between the kids between Bakugo shooting AP shot and the kids arriving. They were probably all really nearby. And with the GPS tracker, there's no way that they weren't that close. Page 16, I love the Momo and Shoto team up, and the prisoner, we have the prisoner captured, which was really good. We also had Izuku being predictable, saying that he's fine, just like how Bakugo said he would say he is fine. That was amazing. Honestly, amazing. Page 17 is Bakugo annoyed, bringing up the smile rhetoric. And just remember, heroes are supposed to smile even when things are bad or at their worst. I believe that's the rhetoric that's been spread around in Hero Academia before. So Bakugo's just pointing that out just to get through to Izuku. But yeah, when you see Bakugo here, the man's annoyed. Like, this man has told Izuku to not do things by himself before, and here we go. Like, they're doing exactly what he said not to do. And then page 18 is the showdown. Izuku telling them to get out of his way, and Bakugo calling Izuku an All Might wannabe. And then you also have like Ida tapping Bakugo on the shoulder. I think just those gloves seem like his. And you have Ida also telling the class to stand strong. So they knew that Izuku was going to be stupid, which honestly, like, that's not a... They know him. They know how this guy gets. Ida especially knows how the guy gets. And I like that Ochako's contribution to that line was just a yeah. Oh, Ochako. I feel like the author's really letting you down. But yeah, no, man. Next week is going to be good. In terms of other things that we could end up seeing, like, I would like to see people using all their special abilities. I would like to see Izuku, you know, if he's going to be predicting them, I would love to see Izuku being like, okay, gotta avoid this. I know how to avoid that. Kirishima's a non-issue. I want to see all those things. If we see like really good team play, that'd be really good. The problem is, like, how many of them are really good at working together? Only a few of them are actually really, really good at working together. If we're looking for like hardcore team combos, we're looking at Ashiro, Hagakure, and Aoyama. We're looking at Bakugo and Shoto. We're looking, well, Bakugo and anyone, because Bakugo can make anything work. We're looking at Uraraka and Tsuyu. Those are the team ups that we would be seeing here. Yeah. Ultimately, I hope Izuku doesn't try to win. I hope he tries to run away. I think that'd be the better move for him. Anyway, guys, those are my thoughts for this week of Hero Academia. I think overall it's a solid chapter. And I'm in general, I'm excited to see what exactly is going to happen with this next little confrontation. And I guess if there's any question that I would like you guys to think about or answer, what do you think? Do you think this is going to be the next big fight for Izuku? And then in terms of the future here, is this going to fix Izuku? I think Izuku's too stubborn. I don't think this is going to be enough for him, unless they go into like really passionate rhetoric. I don't see Izuku really breaking. I think Izuku is going to be shown the error of his ways when he actually makes a big mistake. There's a lot of opportunities for big mistakes here, though. Like, if he actually hurts his friends, that could be like a big mistake. What we're looking at here, this isn't a simple situation of people being able to convince Izuku. This is going to be a situation where Izuku needs to see that he is wrong. And to do that, that usually requires a lot of hurt. So we'll have to see what's going to go down after this moment. But yeah, let me know what you thought down below, guys. Until next time, I hope you have an absolutely great day.